welcome to Old Guys Gentlemen Flex Fountain Pens. And this is video number 5, I think. Anyhow, it'll say it on the title. This isn't so much about flex pens as it is about me trying to figure out what journal do I want, with what kind of paper. I'd like to get to the point where I'm doing like a daily journal, and I definitely want to do a journal whenever we go on vacation or visit special places. So I did some research on the internet and read lots of comments. I posted a question on the Fountain Pen Network on Facebook. And what I got is everybody has their own personal favorite. I wouldn't be surprised if there were at least 20 different brands of journals that people really like compared to the other ones. So I figured, well, I'll take some of the suggestions that people had made, and I had some of the notebooks already, and I went ahead and bought I think 4 others just for comparison purposes. And I'll use the pads anyhow, so no notebook, no paper around here gets wasted by me. I figured I'd check it against several different pens and a few different inks. The pens that I've been using a lot lately are the Waterman Commando. This is the Pilot Heritage Custom 912. This is another Waterman 0452. And this is a wet noodle. It's a Conklin. That's not a brand name wet noodle, but it's the action of the flex. This is a Conklin Endura, I believe. So what I did, I've been using a lot of Clairefontaine notebooks. And so I compared it to Clairefontaine, some Tomo River paper, a Rhodia pad, a Maruman, and a black and red. And I checked them against several different attributes. Other people might have other attributes. They were some of the ones that were important to me. I put a point scale on it. Should have been a weighted point scale. I didn't do it that much. I also had a couple other ones. I have a couple different pads of Leuchtturm 1917, and I did not compare those. There is a bleed-through issue with this paper, and maybe a tiny bit of feathering. I also had another notebook. It's a Fabriano, and it had too much, I'm calling it ghosting, other people call it shadowing, a little bit of indentation. It's really good for experimenting, some of my letters, practicing, things like that, but not something for journaling. So these are the ones that I'm seriously considering right now. There's also a couple others I ordered. There's I think it's called a Hippo Noti, something like that. A lot of people went wild about that one, and but I'm not sure when I'm going to have it, so I figured I'd compare these. So what I did is on each one, I wrote down the title of each pen. I didn't mention inks. Most of them are Pilot, some are Visconti, and I think one is Edelstein. Probably not pronouncing that right. Edelstein. That's a Pelican Jade. And the Pilot Custom has some of my 25% dilution of the photo flow. It's a wetting agent to make sure there's no railroading. And then after writing down each of the titles, I judged for myself, I looked at it and see, well, did it bleed through? In this case, it didn't. Did it feather at all? And There was no real feathering. Did it feel smooth? And I changed some of these things because as I went through, I found one felt better than the other, and then I went back and had to change stuff. So smoothness is about a 5 on this too. And this is on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being most excellent. Drying time was a 3. It wasn't so good. Took a while to dry using this stuff. Ergo, although that's not a very good journaling one. It's too big. Here we go. Travel size. Okay, so I got and ghosting. Some people call it shadowing and indentation. These two, if they're not that good, then I'm relegated to just writing this page, and I kind of would like to write on both pages. This stuff is relatively inexpensive, but it's not dirt cheap. So I think when I journal, I'll write on both sides. And in this particular one, the indentation, you can't really feel anything. Ghosting, you can't see it, but there's just a teeny tiny amount. Almost none. That should almost be maybe a 5. But yeah, I came up with a score of 27, so this is one of my better ones. It's very white compared to all the other ones. It also has French rule, which is nice. Although maybe I'm slowly getting good enough now I don't need the French rule. Maybe dots are fine, or just lines. But the French rule is really good for learning Spencerian, I've found. This happens, I should have mentioned this up front. This is a Clairefontaine 8731 wire-bound French rule. It's an A5 size. It's got 90 gram paper, and there's 60 sheets in there. And I got it at Amazon for about $10.75. This is the cover. So it's just a spiral bound. I had a friend that needed to get letters, and so I was writing him a bunch of letters. And I would write it on this and then tear it out, and it didn't look that great because all this stuff kind of goes flying every which way. But in terms of writing experience, it's really nice and smooth, and so this is still one of my favorites. Before I started looking at these other ones, I was using this most of all. I had gotten some. This happens to be the Taroko Design Tomei Toma River A5. It's 68 gram paper. It's a notebook. Got it on Amazon, a 2-pack for $18. And again, I wrote the 4 different pens up here and gave it a score. There's no bleed through. There's no feathering. The smoothness is pretty close to the Clairefontaine, but I think the Clairefontaine is a little bit smoother. Drying time is 4, where the drying time before was 3, so it dried a little bit faster than the Clairefontaine. Indentation and ghosting. I ended up getting help from somebody, again, on the Fountain Pen Network Facebook with what she called a pencil board, and I ended up making one. Without that, there were strong indentations. It would be difficult to write on the opposite side. Now there's no indentations with this, but there is ghosting. So you can see the writing on the other side, and I don't think I really particularly like that. And I think this is the 68 gram one, which a lot of people think are the bee's knees. But because of the ghosting and indentation, it gets marked down. It's a score about 24. Okay. Just for grins, I had a couple of these, and I figured, what does the white look like? Because the Clairefontaine, which is white, I really kind of like that. And the same, this happens to be online, same price, and it's good paper, and in my world, that's a pretty good score. I guess the other thing I really like about it is that the sheets are so thin, you could have a really thick book of this stuff, and you wouldn't notice it. So that's all good. But I think if I use this, I would only want to write on one sheet at a time. Okay, So that's that one. This Rhodia, I thought I was going to get Rhodia paper in it, but this happens to be the Rhodia web notebook. I think some people call this the Webby. And I really like the cover. It's called Leatherette, Italian Leatherette. Feels like leather. Almost even kind of smells like leather, but I guess it's not. Wrote the names up here. This is the Web Notebook A5. It's 90 gram Clairefontaine. There's 80 sheets in here, 160 pages. And this will take care of any vacation. It's $15, which isn't too bad. The bleed score is doesn't bleed at all. Feathering, none. Smoothness is just as smooth as the other Clairefontaine. Surprise, surprise. Drying time was not as good. Tomo River. With this kind of paper, Clairefontaine, you got to carry this, or you got to be patient. No indentation, and there was just a shade of ghosting, but not much. So I could write on the other side. It wouldn't be that much of a problem. I like the way that looks. So that kind of goes with two books I really kind of like. Now here's another one I can't pronounce. The Mnemosyne with a 7mm line spacing from Maruman. So I wrote the different names in here. There's no bleeding. There's no feathering. It's really smooth, but when you write on it, it just feels a little draggy, like when you change directions. And I don't feel that the other two that I like with the Clairefontaine paper. So I marked it down on that. Not quite as smooth. I mean, if you're just drawing a straight line, it's just as smooth. But I think maybe because the surface of the paper must be slightly softer. I don't know. The dry time was better than the Clairefontaine stuff and the Rhodia. And indentation, there was no indentation, and ghosting or shadowing, just a little bit, but I could live with that. And so the final score on this one was 27, and I think the other two are 27. Yes. So now we got a three-way tie going for my choice. The black and red looked kind of intriguing to me, but there are problems with this. It's black and red business journal, A5, 71 sheets, $8.40 on Amazon. But there is feathering and bleeding. It's not quite as smooth. It is a smooth paper, but not quite as smooth. The drying time's real fast. So if you have something where stuff is going to feather and bleed through, it's probably going to dry fast, and indeed it does. Indentation was not too bad, but ghosting was horrible. And that's because if you're going to bleed through, you automatically get ghosting. So this one's not going to work for me. So not this one, and I'm going to have to decide between the Clairefontaine, the Rhodia with Clairefontaine, or the Mnemosyne. Now, the Mnemosyne also has these perforated pages that come out, so that's a plus on this one. It's not quite as white. It's not quite as white as the Clairefontaine. I really kind of like the leather feel for this thing. And this is an what do we call that? It's not off-white. Anyhow, I didn't think I'd like it, but I do like it. I was showing it to my wife, and she says, "Oh, I like that color." So I may shift to this one for journaling. And if I'm going to write letters to people, I probably need to have separate sheets rather than pull them out like I have done before. Although this one would be easy to pull out. So I'm still kind of searching, but I know now that the Clairefontaine, for me, is the best. If I were to weight these things, the smoothness is really high up there. Being able to use both sides is high up there. Drying time's not that big of a deal. It's a little bit of a hassle carrying this with you if you're on a trip somewhere, but it doesn't take up that much space. And it's affordable. I mean, this is $10. This was $15. I've got to say though, if I'm at a lodge somewhere or on a cruise or someplace where a coffee shop, and I pull out a book like this, somebody's going to probably look at that and go, "Oh, there is a real serious journal guy," for whatever that's worth. So I hope you got some value out of this. When I get the other, I think there's 2 others that I had ordered, I'll add those onto this review and probably republish it. So until next time, thank you.